Yo, name's Lana Connolly, 34 years old, and out of nowhere, my wedding vid blew past 2 million views a couple months back. But this ain't about the day I said I do. Nah, this kicks off with a phone call from my mom, the kind where you can literally hear her rehearsing the lines before she even says them, like she's reading a weather report for a storm she created. She hits me with, "It's better if you don't come. You'd ruin the atmosphere." Atmosphere. She said that about my little sister Shelby's wedding to some dude named Brett Winslow at this fancy joint called Whitehaven Resort. A place so extra that the napkins probably got a higher thread count than my bed sheets. My mom, Diane Connolly, straight up decided I didn't belong. But before I spill the tea, smash that like and subscribe, and drop where you're listening from and what time it is. I love knowing where this story lands. So let me roll you back to a random Tuesday in March when my phone buzzed and my mom's voice came through like a forecast nobody ordered. Picture this. My mac and cheese was just starting to bubble on the stove, oven mitt on one hand, wooden, spoon in the other. For a sec, I thought about not picking up. My mom's got this gift for calling right when something needs my attention. "Lana, we gotta talk about Shelby's wedding." I turned down the heat, leaned against the counter. Kitchen smelled like sharp cheddar and brown butter. Total comfort food for that Tuesday night kind of tired that just settles into your shoulders, you know? She says, "Shelby's wedding is at Whitehaven Resort, like she's announcing a dang diplomatic summit. Very exclusive limited guest list, you understand?" I didn't say squat. I learned years ago that silence is the fastest way to get my mom to spill what she really means. Then she adds, "Reed wouldn't fit in there anyway. You know how he is at nice places. Reed, my fiancé, the guy who builds furniture with his own two hands and restores sailboats other folks gave up on. The same dude who once drove 3 hours in a snowstorm to fix a stranger's porch 'cause the guy's wife called his shop crying." So I ask her, "Mom, are you saying I'm not invited?" And she goes, "I'm saying it's better if you don't come." There it was. No apology, no dressing it up. Just the ugly truth. I scraped the burnt edges off my mac and cheese and just stood there in the kitchen, trying to remember the last time my mom actually asked me to be somewhere instead of asking me to stay away. I couldn't think of a single time, not one. That was the pattern, and I'd been living inside it so long I'd mistaken it for wallpaper. You ever do that? Just get used to the cracks? Shelby's birthday parties always had matching napkins and pro photographers. Mine? A store-bought cake and a card signed in my mom's handwriting that always looked rushed. Shelby's engagement. Announcement got framed and put on the mantle. Mine got a 4-second silence and then, "Well, I hope you thought this through." Holiday photos on the wall where I'd been cropped out so neat you'd think the family only had one daughter. That night, I threw the burnt mac in the trash. Reed found me standing in the dark kitchen at midnight, and he didn't say a word. Just handed me a cup of tea and sat on the counter next to me. That's the thing about growing up second. You don't always notice it happening. It creeps in sideways, like humidity. You wake up one day and everything's damp, and you can't remember when it started. Take Shelby's high school graduation. My mom hired a photographer, professional, with a reflector and a second lens and all that. There's 47 photos from that day. I counted once. Shelby in her cap, Shelby with her friends, Shelby and Mom cheek to cheek like an ad for maternal pride. Then my college graduation, 4 years later, a different school, a degree in conflict resolution that took 5 years 'cause I worked nights. My mom forgot the date. She texted me the next day. Did I miss it? No apology, no follow-up, just a question mark that somehow felt like a period. Then Shelby's engagement party 2 years ago, my mom flew to Florida, booked a hotel, coordinated a brunch for 30 guests. When I called her the next month to say Reed had proposed, the line went quiet for 4 seconds. I counted those too. Then she says, "Well, I hope you thought this through." That was it. No congrats, no joy. Just that same old doubt. The hairspray smell is what I remember most. Every special occasion in our house, my mom would stand in the bathroom spraying Shelby's hair into something magazine-worthy. I'd sit on the edge of the tub watching. She never turned the can toward me. Not once. Took me a long time to figure out I wasn't the problem. My face was. I look like my dad, the guy who bounced when I was 9, the guy my mom never forgave for leaving. His jaw, his brow, his quiet stubbornness live on in my mirror every morning. Shelby looks like Mom. Golden, photogenic, easy to show off. I look like the man who broke her heart, and every time she sees me, she sees him walking out the door. One night, I went digging through the garage and found a cardboard box behind the holiday decorations. Inside, every childhood photo of me that used to hang on the wall. All of them removed from their frames, stacked face down, edges soft from moisture. Shelby's photos were still on the mantel, dust-free and backlit. I put the box back. Sometimes evidence doesn't need a courtroom. It just needs you to finally stop pretending you didn't see it. Reed's workshop sits at the end of a gravel road that bends along the river, past a bunch of birch trees and a mailbox that hasn't matched the house in years. The building's old, a converted boathouse with a tin roof that's gone from red to rust and back again. Inside, it smells like linseed oil and sawdust, and that particular warmth of wood that's been worked by hand. When I drove out there the day after that phone call, Reed was sanding the hull of a 1942 sailboat he'd been restoring for 8 months. The boat's oak and cedar, bruised by decades of neglect, and he's bringing it back the way he brings everything back. Slowly, with his hands, one layer at a time. He named her Second Wind. I sat on an overturned crate and told him what my mom said. He didn't stop sanding. The rhythm of it, long, even strokes, was the only sound between us for a while. Then he says, "Your mom's not the worst person I know, she's just the most afraid." I'd never thought of it that way. Afraid of what? Of me? Of what I represent? Of a life that don't look like the one she rehearsed? We started talking about our own wedding. We'd been planning it loose. Small, right there at the workshop. Nothing fancy. Reed offered to build the tables himself. I'd been collecting wildflower seeds from my neighbor Margot Tillman's garden. We didn't have a budget spreadsheet or a coordinator. We had a river, good light, and 100 people who actually knew our names. I told him what she said. You wouldn't fit in at Whitehaven. He wiped the sawdust off his forearm with the back of his hand. The workshop doors were open, and the late sun was cutting through at a low angle, turning everything amber. Then he says, "Lana, I wasn't invited to Thanksgiving either. I stopped keeping count in year 2. He said it like he says most things, without bitterness, without performance, just fact, like reading the weather. I watched him go back to sandin'. The hull was starting to gleam where he'd stripped the old varnish. Underneath all that damage, the wood was still good. It just needed someone patient enough to find it. Shelby called 2 days later, and I knew it was coming. The way you know rain's coming when the air gets thick. "Lana, hi. I heard Mom talk to you." Her voice was honey poured over something sharp. I could hear ice clinking in a glass on her end, mid-afternoon cocktail, which for Shelby is practically a personality trait. "She did. I just want you to know it wasn't my idea." Pause. Calibrated. "I told her you should come." "Did you?" "Of course. But you know how she is." And honestly, clink, Mom has a point. Brett's family is very polished, and Reed, no offense, he'd probably show up in work boots. Reed owns exactly one pair of dress shoes. He bought them for my company holiday party 3 years ago, and polished them himself, but Shelby doesn't know that 'cause Shelby's never been to anything we've invited her to. "We could do a girls' lunch after," she offers, voice liftin'. "Just us. My treat." That's Shelby's signature move, the consolation prize disguised as generosity. A brunch you didn't ask for to replace an event you were excluded from. She's been doing it since we were kids. Break my crayons, then offer me one of her markers. Always the wrong color. I appreciate the call, Shelby. Of course. I just didn't want you to think I don't beat. Okay, love you. I hung up, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel sad about my sister. I felt something sharper. Not anger. That would come later and leave quick, like a summer storm. This was quieter, cleaner, clarity. I'd spent 34 years translating my family's behavior into something I could live with. Mom doesn't mean it that way. Shelby's just stressed. They love me. They just show it differently. I was fluent in that language. I could conjugate every excuse, but sitting there in my kitchen, phone still warm in my hand, I realized I was done translating. The words meant exactly what they said. You'd ruin the atmosphere. He'd show up in work boots. My treat. Some conversations end with a goodbye. This one ended with a period I'd been too polite to place for 3 decades. The next Saturday morning, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a roll of brown craft paper. Reed's radio was playing jazz from the workshop, close enough to hear the bass line through the open window. I uncapped a blue pen and started writing names. Not a guest list, a gratitude list. Margot Tillman, my neighbor who's been bringing soup to our door every time I got sick for 7 years. Not 'cause I asked, but 'cause she noticed. Dave and Elena Parker, my colleagues who helped me move apartments at midnight when a pipe burst in my old building. Elena showed up with pack-in tape and her daughter's wagon. Dave carried my bookshelf down 3 flights of stairs without complaining once. Coach Barnett, my high school softball coach, who drove 4 hours to watch me receive a mediation certification award that nobody in my family attended. He sat in the back row and clapped like I'd won a championship. Mrs. Haddox, my 10th grade English teacher who wrote on my final essay, "You have a voice. Use it." I found her on social media 6 years ago, and we've been exchanging birthday cards ever since. Reed added his names too. There was Frank, a retired shipwright who taught him dovetail joints when he was 19. There was the Kimura family, whose fishing boat Reed repaired at cost after a storm nearly sank their livelihood. There was Janet, his first client, who still comes by every spring with homemade jam. By noon, we had 120 names. Every single one of them could tell you a story about why they were on that paper. No obligation invites, no business contacts, no people we met once at a thing. Just hands that held ours when things got heavy. Reed looked at the list and said, 120 people. Every one of them showed up when it mattered. I picked up the pen again. At the bottom of the craft paper, I wrote one more name, my mother's, and I circled it. Reed saw it. He didn't say anything, just refilled my coffee and went back to the workshop. Some invitations are offered with both hands open. You extend them knowing full well they might be handed back. Shelby's wedding was on a Saturday in April. I know 'cause Instagram told me and 'cause my mother had posted a countdown that started 45 days prior. I spent the morning in my garden, turning the soil in the raised beds Reed built from reclaimed dockwood. The dirt was cool and damp from overnight rain, and there's something deliberately grounding about pushing your hands into the earth while your sister says her vows to a guy you've met twice. By afternoon, the photos started flooding my feed. Whitehaven Resort draped in white organza, 300 guests seated in rows of gilded chairs, an ice sculpture, a live string quartet, Shelby in a gown that probably cost more than my car. Smiling that smile I knew was rehearsed 'cause I'd watched her practice it in the bathroom mirror since she was 12. I scrolled through the photos the way you drive past a house you used to live in, curious but not homesick. I recognized maybe 40 people in the crowd. The rest were strangers. Brett's business partners, my mother's social circle, people whose names appear on place cards but not in anyone's phone on a Tuesday at 2 a.m. when things fall apart. That evening, my Aunt Patricia called. Patricia's my mother's younger sister and the only member of the family who still treats me like I exist on purpose. I wish you were here, honey, she said, voice low like she'd stepped into a hallway to make the call. Your mother is performin'. I could hear the reception behind her. Laughter, clinkin', the muffled thump of a DJ playing something with too much bass. Are you okay? She asked. I'm good, Aunt Patricia. Really? Good, 'cause I'm eating shrimp that costs $14 a piece and I can't taste a thing. This party has no soul. I thanked her, meant it, then put the phone down and went back to the garden. The soil was warm now, and the tomato seedlings I'd planted that morning were already standing straighter. That evening, Shelby posted a video of her first dance. 500 hearts, 20 comments from people I'd never heard of, and one from Mom. My perfect girl. I closed the app. In 6 weeks, it'd be my turn, and I wasn't going to perform for anyone. I made my mother's invitation by hand, craft paper, just like the guest list. I wrote her name in blue ink, folded a sprig of dried lavender inside, and sealed it with wax from a candle Margot had given me. It was the kind of invitation that asks nothing except your presence. Reed watched me address the envelope. You sure? He said. She's my mother. I know. That's why I'm asking. I mailed it on a Monday. By Thursday, I'd already stopped expecting a response. Not 'cause I gave up, but 'cause I'd been managing my mother's silences for so long I'd learned to breathe through 'em. She called on Friday. I was washing dishes. I dried my hands on my jeans and picked up. A workshop? She said, like I'd just named a crime scene. Flat, horrified. You want me to sit on a dock and watch you marry that carpenter? He's a restoration craftsman, Mom. And yes, there'll be a chair with your name on it. Lana, be realistic. This isn't a wedding. It's ours. She paused. I could hear her recalibrating, the way she always does when someone don't follow the script she wrote in her head. I'll think about it, she said. In my mother's vocabulary, I'll think about it has never once preceded yes. It's a polite no, the kind she can later point to and say, I considered it. 3 days later, the invitation came back in the mail. The envelope was unopened. On the front, in my mother's firm, practiced handwriting, return to sender. No note, no explanation, just those 3 words in the same blue ink I'd used for her name, as if she'd chosen the color on purpose. I stood at the mailbox for a long time. The lavender sprig had slipped out through a tear in the corner, dried and fragile, clinging to the flap. I pressed that lavender between the pages of my grandmother's cookbook, the one Diane threw. Away after Grandma passed, the one I rescued from the curb before the garbage truck came. The binding's cracked, the pages smell like vanilla and flour, and it holds recipes for every kind of love my grandmother believed in. Some things you keep, not 'cause they're yours, but 'cause someone should remember they existed. The transformation started on a Saturday in May, 5 weeks before the wedding. Reed sent out a text to his network. No group chat, no mass email, just individual messages that said, We're getting the workshop ready. Bring whatever you got. And they showed up with everything. Dave Parker arrived first with a truck bed full of reclaimed dock planks and a circular saw. He spent the afternoon building a dance floor on the concrete pad where Reed usually stores whole timber. By sundown, it was level and smooth and smelled like fresh-cut cedar. Margot came with her vintage lace curtains from 1978, the ones she used at her own wedding, folded in tissue paper all these years. She draped them across the workshop's open bay doors so they'd catch the river breeze. The lace was yellowed and delicate, and it turned the afternoon light into something that belonged in a painting. Elena Parker strung twinkle lights along the rafters using a ladder she'd borrowed from her daughter's school. Her 12-year-old Lucy helped thread mason jars with wildflowers, lavender, baby's breath, white daisies from Margot's garden. Reed's friend from the marina, a guy named Hank who mostly speaks in nods, welded a custom arch from salvaged iron railing and set it at the bow of the restored sailboat. It was rough and imperfect and absolutely beautiful. By the end of the first weekend, the workshop looked like a place that had been waiting for this. String lights reflected on the river surface at dusk. The tin roof, which usually sounds like a drum in the rain, now framed the sky like a cathedral ceiling. Total cost, $3,800. Food would be potluck. Music would come from a speaker playing Reed's playlist. The cake, lemon pound cake from a recipe that belonged to Reed's mom, Martha, would be baked by Martha herself. Margot stood back and looked at what we'd built. She tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear and said, "It looks like a place where real things happen." She was right. And real things don't need a guest list of 300 to prove they matter. My mother never could leave well enough alone. 2 weeks after her returned invitation, Aunt Patricia called with the kind of voice you use when you're trying not to sound alarmed. "Honey, I need to tell you something. Your mother's been calling people." "What people?" "Family. Extended family. She told Uncle Frank you're having some kind of breakdown. She told Cousin Denise the workshop wedding is, her words, a cry for help." The washing machine was running behind me, thumping its steady rhythm. Domestic normalcy has a sound, and it's the sound of a spin cycle while your mother dismantles your reputation one phone call at a time. "She called Reed's mother, too," Patricia added, quiet now. That stopped me. "She told Martha that Reed isn't, how did she put it? Stable enough to support a wife? Something about his business failin'. Reed's business has never failed. It came close once, 3 years ago, when a supplier went under and he lost 2 months of materials. He worked double shifts, took on repair jobs he didn't love and rebuilt. The workshop's still standin'. So is he." That evening, Uncle Frank called. Frank's my mother's younger brother, a quiet, practical man who fixes furnaces for a living and has a BS detector that works at a professional grade. "Your mom called," he said, skipping the pleasantries. "She says you're not doing well. That true?" "I'm fine, Uncle Frank. I'm getting married in a workshop on the river with 120 people who actually know me." A long pause. Then, "Your mother has always been creative with the truth." He didn't say more, but I heard it, the click of a man moving his allegiance from one column to another. That night, Reed came home quieter than usual. He hung his jacket on the hook by the door, washed his hands at the kitchen sink, and stood there with the water running longer than he needed to. "Your mother called mine," he said. "I know. Whatever she said, I don't want to repeat. He turned off the faucet. She's trying to undo things before they happen." I didn't ask what things. I already knew. My mother wasn't trying to stop a wedding. She was trying to stop me from building a life that proved. Hers was built on sand. Martha Gallagher drove 3 hours from upstate on a Wednesday morning without calling ahead. She showed up in our driveway in a dusty sedan with a cooler in the back seat and a look on her face that said she'd already made up her mind about something. "I wanted to see the workshop," she said, hugging me at the door. "My son talks about it like it's a church." Martha's 63, wide-shouldered and practical in a way that makes you trust her within 5 minutes. Her husband died when Reed was 16, and she raised 3 boys alone on a librarian's salary and a garden that never quit. She's got calluses on her palms and opinions she don't bother softening. I drove her to the workshop. She stood in the open bay doors, looking out at the river, the string lights, the dance floor Dave built, the sailboat with its fresh varnish glowing in the afternoon light. She didn't say anything for a long time. Then she walked to the front, row of chairs, found the one with Margot's name on it, and nodded. "This is the most honest wedding I've ever seen." We sat on the dock with iced tea, and I told her everything. The phone call, the returned invitation, the calls to family. "Your mother called me," Martha said. "Told me Reed wasn't ready." My stomach dropped. "I'm sorry." "Don't be." I told her my son has been building things since he was 12. He built me a birdhouse when he was 13 that still hasn't fallen apart. He'll build you a good life. She took a sip of tea. And I told her that if she had concerns about my son, she was welcome to come see his work in person. She hung up. Before Martha left the next morning, she'd already started a test batch of her lemon pound cake in my kitchen. The whole house smelled like lemon zest and butter, and she'd written notes in the margin of my grandmother's cookbook. Adjustments for altitude, a trick with cold butter, a small drawing of a heart next to the ingredient list. On the drive home, she texted, "Save me a seat next to that lady with the vintage lace curtains. She sounds like my kind of people." Nina Reeves showed up at the workshop by accident. She's 27, a reporter for the regional newspaper, writing a series called Small Businesses That Survived, profiles of local shops and workshops that have weathered the last decade without folding. Reed's Boatyard was on her list because he'd been featured 2 years ago in a brief mention when the town council voted to preserve the waterfront. She arrived on a Thursday with a camera bag and a notepad, expecting to photograph sailboat hulls and talk about supply chains. Instead, she found string lights in the rafters and mason jars of wildflowers on every flat surface. "Are you getting married in here?" she asked, looking up at the lace curtains catching light. "Next month," I said. Nina's eyes went to the sailboat, then to the dance floor, then to the clothesline I'd strung between 2 oak trees outside the bay doors. We'd be asking guests to write notes and hang them there during the reception. "Can I ask about the wedding for the piece?" She looked around again. "This is a better story than boat restoration." I told her the short version. Getting married here because this is where we built our life. 120 people. Every one of them handpicked by memory. Potluck dinner, homemade cake. She asked if she could bring a video camera on the day, light setup, no disruption, just a few minutes of the ceremony in the venue. I said yes, not because I wanted publicity, but because Nina looked at the workshop the same way Margot had, like she was seeing something she'd forgotten existed. "This is gonna be a good story," she said, packing her camera. I thought she meant the business profile. She'd already moved past that, but I didn't know it yet, and that was probably for the best. If I'd known what her camera would set in motion, I might have said no, or I might not have. Some things are meant to be seen by more than 120 people. The flash from Nina's camera bounced off the hull of Second Wind and filled the workshop with warm gold light for a single second. Then it was gone, and the afternoon went on. The cracks in Shelby's perfect wedding arrived by way of Aunt Patricia, who's got a gift for delivering bad news the way a doctor delivers a diagnosis, calmly with just enough detail to make you pay attention. "Shelby and Brett had a fight," Patricia said. "At the reception, publicly. I was sitting on the workshop dock, feet dangling above the water. Rain was startin', soft, the kind that taps the tin roof in a rhythm. You could almost set a clock to. Brett's mother cornered Diane at the dessert table," Patricia continued. "She said, and I'm paraphrasing because her exact words were worse, 'I don't know half the people here. Who are these people?' Turns out half of Shelby's 300 guests were Diane's additions, her book club, her church. Friends, her hairdresser's family, people Shelby had never met. People who were there because Diane wanted an audience for the production she'd been planning for 2 years. Shelby lost it. She pulled Diane into the bridal suite and screamed at her, "You invited your entire book club. This was supposed to be my day." And Diane said, "I paid for half of this. I can invite who I want." I closed my eyes. The rain was steady now, drumming on the tin roof above me. For a moment, it sounded like applause for something nobody was proud of. It was like watching 2 mirrors reflect each other's vanity, Patricia said. Neither of them could see past their own reflection long enough to notice the other one was doing the exact same thing. I didn't feel triumph. That was the strange part. I thought I might. A small guilty spark of satisfaction. But, sitting there with the rain on the river and Patricia's voice in my ear, all I felt was sad. Sad for Shelby, who'd traded authenticity for spectacle and was surprised when the spectacle broke. Sad for Diane, who couldn't stop performing long enough to realize the audience didn't care. Your mother and your sister are more alike than either of them will ever admit, Patricia said. I didn't disagree, but I also didn't feel like celebrating someone else's cracks. I had my own house to build, and it was going to hold because the people inside it were real. You know, standing here in this story, I keep thinking about all those names on my guest list, 120 people, and every single one could tell you a story about why they were there. If you're still listening, I want to ask, have you ever made a guest list not by obligation but by gratitude? Drop a comment. And if this story's hitting home, that subscribe button's right there. Thanks for staying till the end. Until next time.